Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Cutting Through. I'm Mitchell Plitnick, the president of Rethinking Foreign Policy and the author of the Cutting Through newsletter on Substack. You can subscribe to Cutting Through at mitchellplitnick.substack.com, where you can also donate to support this work. And if you find this valuable, please like and share Cutting Through with your friends and contacts. Now, the more we spread the word, the more support we get, the more I can continue to do this with more guests, more information, and more reporting. So today, I wanted to talk about the Iron Dome system and Israeli missile defense in particular, and how that impacts American politics. A recent amendment was proposed by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, the far right Republican from Georgia, who believes that we are all being targeted by Jewish space missiles. But that amendment, among other things, would have removed $500 million from the grants that go to Israel. That $500 million provides for missile defense, chiefly the Iron Dome system. So that amendment was supported by one other Republican, Thomas Massie, who always opposes aid to Israel, and four Democrats: Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, Summer Lee of Pennsylvania, and Reverend Al Green from Texas. So, notably missing from that list of some of the most progressive Democrats in Congress was the at least perceived leader. She's not the leader of the Progressive Caucus, but she is the leader of what's considered the far left wing, if you want to say. I mean, it's not very far left; it's barely center left, but that wing of the Democratic Party in Congress, that's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And people were surprised that she didn't support the bill. They really shouldn't be. Look, AOC, for one thing, is focused on climbing the ladder in the Democratic Party. In that endeavor, she's not concerned about AIPAC. That's not what worries her. She's not concerned about the Israel lobby. The Israel lobby is going to oppose her no matter what, unless she completely changes not only her positions on Israel and Palestine, but her positions on a whole host of issues. They are generally against progressives unless they have no choice. They'll go with a progressive except for Palestine if they're going up against someone who is progressive and is also progressive on Palestine. But they are not really interested in seeing progressives in Congress, so they generally oppose them. They usually go for more conservative candidates. They're not going to support AOC. She's not worried about the lobby, but what she is worried about is the party leadership. She is worried about how they will react because she's setting her sights right now. And I think, many believe she's setting her sights on Chuck Schumer's Senate seat. Whether or not that's true, she is certainly setting her sights on becoming more and more powerful within the party, which is, let's be honest, something that Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Summer Lee, and Al Green are probably not really seriously considering. They probably don't see that in their future. AOC does, and so that's where she is. That's where she is politically concerned. Now, that's of course not what she said when she was explaining why she voted against this amendment. And here is what she did say, quoting here from her tweet on Twitter, or X, if you want to call it that. She said, and I quote, "Marjorie Taylor Greene's amendment does nothing to cut off offensive aid to Israel, nor end the flow of U.S. munitions being used in Gaza. Of course, I voted against it. What it does do is cut off defensive Iron Dome capacities while allowing the actual bombs killing Palestinians to continue. I have long stated that I do not believe that adding to the death count of innocent victims to this war is constructive to its end. That is a simple and clear difference of opinion that has long been established. I remain focused on cutting the flow of U.S. munitions that are being used to perpetuate the genocide in Gaza." This is a rather pathetic, I would say, misreading of the role that the Iron Dome plays. Not just the Iron Dome, but missile defense in general. Israel knows that it can attack neighboring countries with impunity. It doesn't have to just be in Gaza. It doesn't have to just be in the West Bank. It is in Lebanon. It is in Syria. It is in Iran. It is throughout the region. It's in Iraq as well. It's in Yemen. Israel can do that because they have these advanced missile defense systems. They have a much stronger military, and they have the United States, which is going to help them when they are fired upon. We've seen this numerous times. We saw it both under the Biden administration and the Trump administration when Iran fired missiles at Israel. Not only did Israel have its domestic defense systems and its American provided defense systems, but it also had U.S. ships in the Red Sea, U.S. bases around the region, and U.S. allies who all helped to shoot down Iranian drones and missiles. Now, I agree to some extent with AOC. I do not want to see any more people killed than are already being killed. It is already horrific. And every single person killed is a tragedy, whether that person is Palestinian, Israeli, or other. I think if we stop treating all life as precious, then I think we lose our way and we lose the moral high ground, which is really the only thing that people fighting for justice have on our side. So no, I don't love the idea that more Israelis could be killed. Some Iranian missiles got through. There have been occasional missiles from Gaza that have gotten through both during this genocide and the many years before it. And sometimes Israelis have been killed. I mean, the number is much smaller than that of Palestinians. The damage done in Iran and the people killed in Iran were also of a much greater number than what happened in Israel. But it still happened to Israel. I don't want to see any of that increased. But we cannot ignore the fact that this defense system emboldens Israel to act in an extremely reckless manner. We can talk about, and I hope to do either an article or another video on Israel's actions in Syria, which I think are being, politicized by different sides and are not just Israel's actions, but everything, all the violence that is going on now in Syria and has gone on for years in Syria has been subject to, I think many warped narratives on all sides. And a lot of this is just not fact-based. But the fact of the matter is that the things that Israel is doing, Israel has not only occupied the Golan Heights, which it's occupied for many decades, but it has established an additional, what it might call a buffer zone, but it's just more land under occupation along its border with Syria. And it is dictating to Syria where Syria can deploy its own security forces. It ostensibly says it is doing this in defense of Jewish communities. That's just nonsense. It's not why Israel's doing this. That's not to say that there isn't a bit of a political factor in that. Israeli Druze are an important political sector for the Israeli right. Again, that's a more complicated story. And it's one that's changing as the younger generation of Druze reject that entire arrangement. But for now, it's still that way. It has been for many years. And so, there are certain political considerations there, but for the most part, this is about Israel establishing its hegemony. And it can do that because it has no fear of reprisal. It can attack Lebanon at will because it has no fear of reprisal. It can attack Iran again whenever it chooses to because it has no fear of reprisal, because it knows that even the worst case scenario, Iran just cannot inflict the same amount of damage on Israel that Israel can inflict on Iran because of these missile defense systems, be it Iron Dome, be it Arrow, be it THAAD, or be it the American ships in the Red Sea that intercept missiles before they ever get to Israel. That is not a defensive system. I mean, technically, of course, it's a defensive system, right? Obviously, it's a system that's set up to defend Israel and make sure that people cannot, be hit and injured and killed by enemy missiles. And in and of itself, I would say that's a laudable goal. But Israel has taken unfair and undue advantage of that, as any country really that's involved in any sort of conflict would. It's not, I don't think, unique to Israel that when it feels like it's invulnerable, it's going to go and act more aggressively towards those it sees as either its enemies, its competitors, or its obstacles, depending on the orientation of the regime. And in this case, Israel has some expansionist ambitions, but it also has regional hegemonic ambitions. And it pursues these at will with no restraint, because it's not just because the United States protects it, it's because Israel has been given the means to protect itself and is supported in that in the United States. That's a big deal, and that should not be tolerated, because especially in the most extreme case, which is of course Gaza, Israel can act with utter impunity. If Israeli soldiers weren't on the ground in Gaza, if Israel was only bombing, their casualty numbers would be incredibly low. In fact, might be nil. And they could just, again, do what they want, because there would be no way for the people of Gaza to resist. The puny rockets that they have and things like that cannot pierce the Iron Dome that Israel puts around itself. So we can't just look at this. It is a simplistic argument that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is making, and it's a disingenuous one too. She's not just protecting Israeli lives. If that was all she was doing, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it. But the protection of Israeli lives in this case is increasing exponentially, not just the risk to Palestinian lives, not just the danger to Palestinian lives, but the actual loss of Palestinian lives. And that is not part of AOC's equation here, and that's a problem. And I think that's why most people who might otherwise support her find her stance here so objectionable. I think you can look at her statement and see the responses to it. I think a great many people who should be in her camp are blasting her because of this very disingenuousness, because people realize, and this has been a discussion now for several years, since Rashida Tlaib actually brought it up, and really brought it to the forefront by talking about it on the floor of the House of Representatives several years ago, that Iron Dome, in effect, I mean, in strictly definitional terms and operational terms, yes, it's a defensive weapon. But in effect, it is an incredible addition to Israel's offensive arsenal. And it is something that plays a significant role in the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Israel, put simply, can't do what it does if not for this impunity. And we can talk about the diplomatic impunity. We can talk about how countries, not just the United States, but Europe and also the Arab states, just look the other way or downplay it. I mean, even Ahmed al-Shara, who there are real issues with, and there should be a more rational discussion about Syria and how to best support the Syrian people, and where al-Shara plays. But he is now even cowed, I would say, from overly criticizing Israel. I mean, when they actually bombed the Syrian Defense Ministry, he had to finally say something that had a little bit of spine to it. But for the most part, he's been responding to Israeli attacks by saying, we really want to make peace with Israel. this country that is bombing us willy-nilly and making it impossible for us to rebuild our security systems. Um, that's an offensive weapon. The fact that Israel can do that and not have to worry about retaliation, that's an offensive weapon. It is not a defensive weapon in effect. Again, yes, the definition is what the definition is, but and and again, first of all, let's also say if you pass a bill that ends this, that cuts the appropriation for Iron Dome this year. Let's remember it can be restored later on if that makes sense. So you cut it for now. Israel is not suddenly defenseless. It's not like you take that step and all of a sudden all these, of course, we're dealing with people with Islamophobic visions of these murderous Arab hordes who just want nothing but to kill the Jews but even if that's your picture, okay, cutting this $500 million for the Iron Dome doesn't mean that all of a sudden Israel is defenseless in the face of whatever you think they're facing. It's just not so. Israel will still be quite capable of defending itself and repelling attacks. So it just won't be as capable. And it might have to think twice about its actions in bombing other countries or occupying other countries, invading other countries, which is quite blatantly what they've done in Syria and are still doing in Lebanon. And they're continuing to threaten Iran. Let's not forget about that. While the United States seems to be at least trying to sort of back away from a direct confrontation with Iran, at least for the moment, Israel is pushing very hard to renew those hostilities. And it all comes back to their ability to literally put a shield over their country, something that no other country can really do. The fact that they can do this, this is a big deal. Now, if you're going to argue as a Democrat that you don't want to support Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill because, well, it's Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill, that I had have actually some more understanding for. And the things that she is, it's not only the money for Iron Dome that's in here. There's $500 million that she wanted to strip from money going to Taiwan. The $500,000 that would go to Jordan, which actually would have a much greater impact on Jordan than I'm sorry, did I say $500,000? It's $500 million going to both Taiwan, each to Taiwan and to Jordan. The $500 million to Jordan would make a huge impact there and could possibly even lead to, major ramifications for the kingdom and for the relations within the region. If the Hashemite kingdom should face an uprising, it would also have stripped $15 million. That's a million, 15 million for HIV preventional educational activities around the world, and would have stripped $118 million for overseas humanitarian disaster and civic aid. Now, that's a bad amendment. It is a very problematic amendment, and I think it is worth looking at that and saying, I can't support those things, even if you did support taking out the money, eliminating the funding for Iron Dome. But that's not the argument that AOC is making. She's making the argument that she would never threaten Iron Dome. And that is a grave error. There is never going to be a significant fundamental change in Israeli policy unless there is a reason for Israel to make that change. And the only reason Israel is going to make that change is because they are at risk. That there's a real risk of bad things happening to them if they don't. I mean, no country changes their policy without some of that kind of pressure. So I think I think this is something that needs to be talked about a lot more. The basic narrative around Iron Dome was being challenged, and it was an uphill battle. There's no question about it. You make those arguments in public, and immediately all the pro-Israel groups are saying, "You just want to kill the Jews. You want to see the Jews die." The last thing in the world that I want to see is one more casualty, be it Israeli or Palestinian. It is the last thing I want to see. But if Iron Dome, in terms and again, and all the other systems, if we keep giving Israel THAAD interceptors, we keep supporting Israel in its research into its David Sling project, into Arrow, giving them Arrow missiles, all of this stuff, everything that allows Israel to effectively live under a shield, physically as well as politically. I mean, we need to talk about the protection the United States gives Israel, the Security Council, and the international forum in general, and how it intervenes with other countries when they want to put pressure on Israel. I mean, just we've seen this just in the last few days. That all counts. It's all part of the same thing. But we have to understand, we're not trying to put more Israelis at risk. We're certainly not trying to, and I think this needs to be the case that's made, that we're not trying to get more Israelis hurt or killed. That is the last thing I want. I think it's the last thing most people who value all life want. But the status quo is not just getting Palestinians killed in numbers of dozens or hundreds. It's getting Palestinians killed in numbers of tens of thousands. And it's not stopping, and it's allowing Israel to impact the lives of people all across the region, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iran, in Iraq, in Jordan, in Yemen. Even when people are not directly hurt or killed, their environment is damaged, their economies are damaged, their whole lives are affected. This is happening to millions and millions of people throughout the region, and it's all happening because Israel doesn't have to worry about consequences, and that cannot be tolerated. Israel and every other country, the only thing that restrains any of them, any country in the world, the only thing that restrains them, that stops them from acting in harmful ways, is the threat of consequences. That is true from Micronesia to the United States, all countries except Israel, because Israel gets these special protections. And as a result, Israel acts in an irresponsible and aggressive manner throughout the Middle East, and certainly in the territories, Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem, that it occupies. These are the real issues, and this is the case we need to make. It's the way, but it needs to be made in a humanistic manner. It needs to be made in a way that, yes, we understand that this could mean more insecurity for Israelis, and we hate that. We hate it, and we are desperate to avoid it. But the best way for Israelis to be secure is for Israel is for their government to stop attacking other people. This is the sort of argument we need to make, and we need to make it far, and we need to make it wide. Those of us who are Jewish need to make it speaking as a Jewish community, and speaking in a way of talking to our fellow community members in Israel and here in the United States and in Europe and in Australia and in Canada and in all the places where Jews are active, on both sides, on all sides of this issue. The courage to stand up and do that, which unfortunately AOC lacks, which Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Summer Lee, and Al Green have displayed. And I'm more than willing and happy to dismiss Marjorie Taylor Greene and to dismiss Thomas Massie, because they are not doing this out of love of humanity, out of valuing life. They are doing it because they are isolationists, and they are people who just don't give a damn about anyone outside the borders of the United States and don't give much of a damn about most people within the borders of the United States. But those four Democrats are speaking up, and they are speaking about peace in the real sense, in the global sense, not just in the Israel-Palestine sense. They are speaking about valuing all life. You know, I recently, in fact, I think just yesterday, put out an article about how AIPAC and the Israel lobby is really a paper tiger. It is, because most people believe in these values. Most people believe that it's not okay for a country to be able to bomb other people with a complete impunity. Well, the way we remove that impunity is by making sure that there are consequences. If Israel knows that its victims can't retaliate, then there can't be consequences and they can't stop. So I'll leave it there. As I said, please like, subscribe, and if you can, become a paid subscriber. This is sustained by you. All of this work is sustained by your donations. So if you can become a paid subscriber or donate through Cash App, these options are all available at mitchellplitnick.substack.com. You'll also find links to them in all of the mailings that go out from Cutting Through. So you can, if you sign up, you can do that there. You can send it to your friends and they can help support this work. Whatever you can do, it will be deeply appreciated and will help, I think, independent commentary and journalism, which is what we need if we're going to change these policies. So with that, I will talk to you soon.